My name is Alyssa Monroe, and I learned something about my father the moment he looked at me like I was already replaceable. I had just finished paying off my first house, the one I built alone without anyone in my family helping me. When my father walked inside, he didn't smile. He just scanned the rooms like he was appraising property instead of my life. My sister stood behind him, quiet, wearing that same satisfied expression she always had when she knew I was about to lose something. Then he said it, calm and absolute, that I should transfer the house to her, because she was more deserving than I was. I thought he was joking until I saw my sister's eyes, already avoiding mine like the decision had been made long ago. When I refused, his voice dropped, and he told me I could be removed from the will without a second thought. I didn't argue. I simply opened my bag and placed a sealed folder on the table, watching the color leave his face instantly. This wasn't defense, it was proof that his favorite daughter had already emptied accounts using his signature, without him ever noticing yet. The room went silent after I slid the folder across the table, but my father didn't open it right away. He just stared at me like I had spoken a different language. My sister shifted beside him, suddenly uneasy for the first time I had ever seen it. Then he finally pulled the papers out, and as he read the bank records, his jaw tightened. I watched the exact moment he realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was theft. My sister tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably a clerical error, but her voice cracked halfway through. I leaned forward and told them I had already contacted the bank investigator and every transaction traced back to her login devices. My father finally looked up at me, his anger fading into something closer to disbelief. But then I added one more detail that made the room colder. The house he was trying to give away wasn't fully in his name anymore because months earlier someone had already filed a quiet ownership update under a trust he never approved. And as I watched his face change, I realized he hadn't seen the worst part yet because the signature on it. The silence broke when my father finally snapped the folder shut and demanded I explain what kind of game I was playing. My sister was pacing now, saying I must have hacked something or misunderstood. I stayed calm because I knew exactly what I had found. The house transfer wasn't just an update in the system, it was filed under a legal trust amendment submitted with a notarized signature. My father leaned closer when I said the name on that signature wasn't his usual banker. It was his ex-attorney, who had been disbarred 3 years ago. His face changed again, this time not anger but confusion, because that lawyer had no access anymore. My sister stopped pacing and whispered that she had only signed what he told her to sign. I placed one more document on the table showing camera timestamps from the bank office, where she had verified identity. And that was when I told them the part one hadn't said, yet the witness who notarized everything wasn't a lawyer at all, he was someone my father knew too well, and that made him freeze because he realized the witness was his own brother he had disowned ago. The moment my father heard his brother's name, the air in the room shifted completely. He stepped back from the table like it had burned him, shaking his head in disbelief. My sister tried to interrupt again, but this time my father raised his hand, and she actually stopped. I could see the cracks forming now, not just in his anger, but in everything he thought he knew about her. I slid one final page forward, the one I had been saving for this exact moment. It showed bank approvals, email confirmations, and a trail that led directly to my sister initiating the trust changes herself. My father looked at her now like he was seeing her for the first time without filters or excuses. And that's when I told them the truth no one was ready for, because the house wasn't the real target at all. My sister had been moving money long before I ever bought it, using my father's identity to build a second hidden account structure. The house was just the final piece she tried to claim when everything else was already falling apart behind her. Now I waited for him to decide her fate tonight. The room didn't explode into chaos the way I expected it to. My father stayed frozen, staring at my sister like the truth was rewriting itself in real time. My sister finally broke, insisting she only signed what he told her to sign, but her voice was shaking now. I didn't raise my voice, I just opened my phone and made one call to the bank investigator I had been working with. Within minutes, their shared accounts were flagged and frozen for review, cutting off every move she thought she still controlled. My father turned slowly toward her when the notification came through on his phone, and that was when everything collapsed for him. I placed the final document on the table, the one showing she had already tried transferring the house into her name through a forged approval chain. And then I told them there was one more person involved whose name would decide whether she walked out free or not. Because the witness who notarized everything wasn't my father's brother, he had already agreed to testify against her, and the call confirming his statement was waiting on my phone when I saw my sister reach for exit door. My sister's hand froze inches from the door handle when I let the phone screen tilt just enough for her to see the incoming call. It wasn't dramatic, just a name flashing across the display that made her breathing shift. My father noticed it too, and for the first time, he didn't look at me with anger or confusion, only exhaustion, like the ground beneath him had finally given up holding him up. Answered the call on speaker. The investigator confirmed everything had been traced, verified, and documented, and that my sister had already triggered multiple fraud flags across 3 institutions. My sister whispered my name like it could reset reality, but it didn't. I told her calmly that this wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about containment. My father sat down slowly, like his legs couldn't support the weight of what he had allowed. Then I added the part that mattered most. The house transfer she tried to complete wasn't just blocked, it had been reversed into a protective freeze under my name, meaning any further attempt would automatically escalate into legal action. And that's when I saw it in her face, not fear of losing money, but fear of losing everything she built on lies. My sister finally stopped pretending she was still in control. She turned back into the room slowly, like every step cost her something, and for the first time, she didn't look at my father for rescue. She looked at me, not with anger anymore, but calculation slipping into panic. My father stayed seated, hands clenched together, watching both of us like he was trying to find the point where everything went wrong. I didn't move from my place. I just let the silence stretch until it forced honesty out of the air. My sister said I had planned this, that I had been waiting to destroy her. I shook my head, because that wasn't true. I had only documented what she already did. Then I showed the final layer, the insurance audit request already submitted under my name, triggering a full forensic review of every financial move tied to her accounts. My father finally spoke, but his voice wasn't strong anymore. He asked what happens now, and I told him the truth without emotion. Now, it's out of family hands. The system doesn't care who he loves more. And as I said it, I saw my sister realize the walls weren't closing, they were already locked. The next morning, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like evidence. My father didn't leave his chair until sunrise, and when he finally looked at me, something in him had gone quiet in a permanent way. My sister wasn't gone, but she wasn't the same either. No arguments, no excuses, just a hollow stillness like she was waiting for consequences. She couldn't outtalk anymore. Officials arrived later that day, calm and procedural, confirming what I already knew. The financial trail was enough to trigger a full legal freeze on her accounts and an active fraud investigation across multiple institutions. My father didn't defend her this time. He couldn't. When they asked for statements, he just looked at the floor like he was trying to disappear into it. I didn't feel victorious. I felt distant from all of it, like I had stepped outside a life I used to belong to. Before I left, my father asked me one question: why I didn't come to him first. I told him I did, in every way that mattered, but he only listened when it was already too late. I walked out without waiting for an answer, leaving everything behind that no longer belonged to me.